dispatch 4-2 in the store.
Copy.
What? What did I do?
Put your hands behind your back.
I can't breathe! I can't! Stop resisting!
Please.
See the unit?
We're good. Stay back.
The fluorescent lights of the Brooklyn deli cast harsh shadows across the aisles as Fitzroy Gayle browsed for groceries on that spring evening in 2018. The 46-year-old construction worker had stopped in after work, still wearing his dusty boots and paint-stained jeans. He had no idea that within minutes his life would be irrevocably altered by an encounter that would expose the dangerous gap between police narratives and documented reality. What happened next became a stark illustration of a persistent problem in American policing: the routine practice of officers claiming suspects resisted arrest to justify excessive force, only to have video evidence tell a dramatically different story. Gayle's case, which recently concluded with a $10 million settlement from New York City, reveals not just one officer's misconduct, but a systemic pattern of false accusations that has cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars while destroying lives in its wake. According to the initial police report filed by NYPD officers that night, Fitzroy Gayle was behaving erratically inside the store, appeared intoxicated, and became combative when officers attempted to question him. The report stated that Gayle actively resisted arrest, necessitating the use of force to subdue him. Officers claimed he pushed one officer, attempted to flee, and continued to fight even after being taken to the ground. The narrative painted a picture of a dangerous individual requiring aggressive intervention to protect public safety. This story would have stood unchallenged, as so many similar accounts have throughout history, except for one critical factor. Multiple surveillance cameras captured the entire encounter from different angles, and several bystanders recorded portions of the incident on their cell phones. The video evidence told a completely different story. Surveillance footage shows Gayle calmly selecting items from the store shelves when two NYPD officers entered. According to court documents, the officers had received a vague call about a suspicious person in the area, a description so broad that it could apply to virtually anyone. The officers approached Gayle without apparent cause, and the video clearly shows his hands were visible and empty. His body language displayed confusion rather than aggression. What happened next was captured in disturbing clarity. Within seconds of the initial contact, without any visible provocation, one officer grabbed Gayle's arm. When Gayle instinctively pulled back, a natural human reaction to being suddenly grabbed, the situation escalated explosively. The officer immediately took Gayle to the ground with a forceful takedown while his partner moved in to assist. The video shows Gayle's face pressed against the dirty floor as officers applied their full body weight to his back and neck. His arms were yanked behind him with such force that witnesses later testified to hearing his shoulder pop. For nearly 4 minutes, Gayle remained pinned, his face contorted in pain as he repeatedly gasped that he couldn't breathe. The officers' responses, captured on audio, ranged from silence to commands to stop resisting, despite the video clearly showing Gayle was barely moving. I watched that video 100 times, Gayle's attorney later told reporters. At no point does my client do anything that could reasonably be described as resisting arrest. He asked what he did wrong. He tried to protect himself when grabbed, and then he endured nearly 4 minutes of torture while begging to breathe. The physical consequences of that encounter were severe and lasting. Gayle suffered a torn rotator cuff requiring surgery, multiple fractured ribs, and a concussion. But the legal aftermath proved equally traumatic. Despite the video evidence, Gayle was charged with resisting arrest, assault on a police officer, and obstruction of governmental administration, all misdemeanor charges that carried potential jail time and would have given him a criminal record. For 18 months, Gayle fought these charges while unable to work due to his injuries. He exhausted his savings paying for medical care and legal representation. His family faced eviction. The psychological toll manifested in anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. I couldn't sleep, Gayle recounted in a deposition. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt their weight on my back, felt like I was suffocating again. The charges were eventually dismissed when prosecutors reviewed the surveillance footage, but by then the damage had been done. Gayle had lost his job, his apartment, and his sense of security. He filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of New York and the officers involved, alleging excessive force, false arrest, and malicious prosecution. The legal process dragged on for 5 years. The city initially offered a settlement of $50,000, an insultingly low figure the Gayle's attorneys rejected. As discovery proceeded and more evidence emerged, including internal NYPD communications and disciplinary records, the true scope of the problem became apparent. Investigation into the officers' histories revealed this was far from an isolated incident. The primary officer involved in Gayle's arrest had been the subject of 14 previous complaints, including 5 allegations of excessive force. His partner had 12 complaints on record. Yet both remained on active duty with no significant disciplinary action on their permanent records. This pattern extended beyond these 2 individuals. Attorneys uncovered data showing that the precinct where these officers worked had one of the highest rates of resisting arrest charges in Brooklyn, but also one of the lowest conviction rates on those charges. This statistical discrepancy suggested a troubling pattern. Officers routinely claimed suspects resisted to justify force, but prosecutors and judges who reviewed evidence often found these claims unsubstantiated.
It's a tale as old as modern policing, explained a criminal justice professor at Columbia University, who has studied this pattern extensively. Officers know that claiming resistance provides legal cover for almost any level of force. And who is more credible in the eyes of the system? A police officer or someone they've arrested? The equation only changes when video evidence enters the picture. The proliferation of surveillance cameras and smartphones has fundamentally altered the dynamics of police accountability. Before ubiquitous video recording, cases like Gayle's rarely resulted in justice for victims. Officer testimony was given tremendous weight, and without contradicting evidence, police narratives about resisting suspects were generally accepted at face value. Video evidence has exposed the frequency with which these narratives diverge from reality. Studies analyzing cases where video evidence contradicted police reports have found discrepancies in a substantial percentage of cases involving force. Officers have claimed suspects threw punches when video shows they didn't, insisted people were fleeing when they were standing still, and described threats that never materialized. In Gayle's case, the video evidence was unambiguous. Frame-by-frame analysis conducted by experts hired by his legal team demonstrated that at no point during the encounter did Gayle engage in any action that would constitute resistance under New York law. His initial pulling away when grabbed was consistent with startle reflex, an involuntary response that courts have repeatedly held does not constitute resistance. Once on the ground, he remained largely immobile, except for labored breathing. The city's own use of force experts, when finally compelled to review the footage during litigation, acknowledged that the force used was not justified by Gayle's actions. This admission proved crucial in the settlement negotiations. After 5 years of litigation, extensive discovery, and multiple failed settlement conferences, New York City agreed to pay Fitzroy Gayle $10 million to resolve his federal civil rights lawsuit. The settlement, finalized in early 2024, ranks among the largest ever paid by the city in an excessive force case involving a survivor. The settlement agreement included several notable provisions. While the city admitted no wrongdoing, standard language in municipal settlements, it agreed to pay the full amount without requiring Gayle to sign an expansive non-disclosure agreement, allowing him to speak publicly about his experience. The city also agreed to ensure the involved officers received additional training on use of force and implicit bias, though it stopped short of agreeing to terminate their employment. For Gayle, now 52 years old, the money represents some measure of justice, but he emphasizes it cannot restore what was taken. $10 million can't give me back 6 years of my life, he said in a statement following the settlement. It can't undo the nightmares, the pain, the loss of who I was before that night, but maybe it sends a message that this can't keep happening. His attorney was more pointed. This settlement reflects the severity of the misconduct and the city's recognition that a jury would likely have awarded even more. But the real question is why these officers remain employed and why the systems that enabled this continue to function unchanged. Gayle's settlement is part of a staggering financial toll that police misconduct exacts on American cities. New York City alone has paid out over $900 million in police misconduct settlements over the past decade, with excessive force claims representing a significant portion. Nationwide, the figure runs into billions annually. This represents an enormous cost to taxpayers who fund these settlements through municipal budgets, even as cities often struggle to finance schools, infrastructure, and social services. Critics argue this system creates perverse incentives. Officers face minimal personal consequences for misconduct, while citizens bear the financial burden. Reform advocates have long pushed for changes to this dynamic, including requiring officers to carry personal liability insurance, eliminating qualified immunity protections that shield officers from individual lawsuits, and creating more robust disciplinary systems that actually remove problem officers from duty. Some jurisdictions have implemented early warning systems designed to identify officers with patterns of complaints before they generate massive settlements, but implementation has been inconsistent. In Gayle's case, the officers involved remained on full duty throughout the litigation. Records show both received regular promotions and pay increases during this period. While the city settlement doesn't constitute an admission that they violated Gayle's rights, the size of the payout speaks volumes about the city's assessment of the evidence and its likely outcome at trial. The national reckoning with police practices following George Floyd's murder in 2020 generated renewed momentum for reform. Many jurisdictions, including New York, implemented new policies regarding use of force, body cameras, and discipline. The NYPD revised its patrol guide to emphasize de-escalation and ban certain restraint techniques. However, advocates argue that fundamental problems persist. The resisting arrest charge remains one of the most commonly filed in the criminal justice system, and video evidence continues to emerge showing officers claiming resistance where none exists. The legal standards for what constitutes justifiable force remain broad, giving officers wide discretion that courts are reluctant to second-guess. Body-worn cameras, once hailed as a transparency panacea, have proven more complicated in practice. While they provide crucial evidence in cases like Gayle's, studies show they haven't dramatically reduced use of force incidents or complaints. Officers control when cameras are activated, footage can be withheld from public view, citing ongoing investigations, and camera angles don't always capture the full context of encounters. Qualified immunity, the legal doctrine that protects officers from civil liability unless they violate clearly established constitutional rights, remains a significant barrier to accountability. Although New York State has modified this doctrine somewhat, it still shields officers in many circumstances, making settlements like Gayle's relatively rare despite the prevalence of misconduct. Fitzroy Gayle's case illustrates both progress and persistent failure in police accountability. The surveillance footage that captured his assault represents the kind of evidence that was simply not available in previous generations, when countless similar incidents occurred in the dark. The substantial settlement acknowledges the severity of the violation and provides some financial remedy. Yet Gayle's journey also reveals profound systemic deficiencies. He endured years of trauma, legal battles, and financial hardship before receiving justice. The officers who assaulted him faced no apparent consequences. The systems that enabled the incident, vague standards for stops, inadequate officer screening, ineffective discipline, reflexive defense of officer conduct, remain largely unchanged. Real reform requires confronting uncomfortable realities about policing in America. It means acknowledging that resisting arrest has become a catch-all justification for violence, often applied retroactively to explain away excessive force. It means recognizing that officer testimony given under oath sometimes deliberately misrepresents events. It means building accountability systems with real consequences, not just training modules and policy documents. For Gayle, the settlement brings a chapter to a close but cannot restore what was lost. He still experiences chronic pain from his injuries, still struggles with anxiety in public spaces, still carries the psychological scars of being brutalized by those sworn to protect. His story joins countless others in the long, painful archive of American policing, a testament to the urgent need for transformation in how we conceive of public safety and who pays the price when it fails. As cities continue writing multi-million-dollar checks to settle misconduct claims, taxpayers might reasonably ask, wouldn't it be cheaper and more just to simply stop the misconduct in the first place?